Hi, everyone. I thought I would go live with you today on this beautiful sunny day in southwestern France where Katie and I are staying. Oh, wait, you can probably hear the rain. It's not sunny at all. So, what I wanted to do today is talk about my stepfather. My stepfather was 93 years old. He died a week ago last Saturday at about 4 a.m. in the morning. His name is James Rudolph Joseph Roberts, and he was survived by my mother, who is almost 80, and five children, no, six children, five children from a previous marriage, one from his marriage to my mother, and then my brother and I, his stepchildren. So he had eight kids that he was a parental type to. And what I want to do in this is not actually a eulogy, it's really kind of just a discussion about some things that maybe can be taken and put to good use in our lives by doing a little bit of a review of a life at the end. And one of the things that I want to do is set a little context. So I had my friend Tiffany Baker come onto the show this spring, and Tiffany is someone who has multiple vocations that run all at once. And one of Tiffany's main concerns is she is a death doula. And as a death doula, what she does is she helps people through the end of life process, people and their family, during the end of life process up to and beyond the point of passing over. And one of the reflections that Tiffany gave to me recently was she was talking to me about the dysfunctional relationship that we have in our country, in our culture, in our society, in many countries around the world with death. We don't talk about it, and when we do, it's uncomfortable. We put it off to the last minute. We pretend like we're never going to die. And another thing that we do is after someone dies, we can only say nice things about them. That's one of the unwritten rules of our society. And what this does is it robs us of our ability to actually take lessons from that life in review. I mean, there's never going to be a time that we have better perspective on a life than we do at the end of the life, whether it's ours or someone else's. And so not being able to discuss the reality that we've perceived of that life is a missed opportunity in our society. And so I want to share some thoughts about my stepfather and my childhood in the context of my childhood, or actually my childhood in the context of my stepfather. And I guess it starts with the fact that he came into my life when I was 5 years old. My parents were divorced, I think that year. I think I was either late in I was almost five or just five when my parents split. And that year, my mom started working at a health club in Chico, California, and it was the first health club in Chico, California. It was called TAC Health Club. And the owner of TAC Health Club was Jim Roberts, and he would soon be my stepfather. At the time, Jim had a wife and five children. We're not going to get into the, juicy, gossipy details of, how that all went down. But it wasn't very long before they were divorced. After he and my mom met, my mom started working for him, and we rented a house behind their house, and one thing led to another. The divorce happened, and by the time I was 6 years old, my mom and stepdad were married. And Jim's five kids and his ex-wife moved to Oregon, and we moved in with Jim. And so it began. And what I'd like to say about this is that I became aware as a child of the experience that my step siblings had with Jim, and it wasn't a good one. All five of them would agree with this and have told me from at various times that it wasn't the greatest. He was fairly abusive in emotionally and certainly at times physically, and he had quite a temper. And of course, the classic story is it gets a little bit better with each child. So the fifth child, I'm not sure if he would have the same story, but I think he would. I do know that the fourth child, who eventually moved in with us, my dear brother Jimmy, has told me many stories about his father's temper and some of the abuse that he received. But a lot of it in talking to them was emotional. And what happened to me in my early adulthood is what I fell into this comparison trap. Even as a child, I was there. And the comparison trap is this, that I looked at my experience with Jim, which wasn't great, and I'll talk a little bit about it in a moment. It wasn't as bad as my step-siblings. And so I thought, well, what do you have to complain about? And then I started working in food service as a teenager and in college, and I knew a lot of kids who were abused much worse than I was. They suffered a lot worse than I did in their childhood. And so it left me thinking, just you don't have anything to complain about. You had it pretty good, I had this idea that if I didn't get hit with a pipe wrench or thrown down some stairs or sexually abused, that I had it pretty good. Because I had kind of a calico childhood. I was really unhappy in a lot of ways, and then I had these bright spots in my life. And the bright spots were my mother. Sure, she was allowing things to go on in the house, but she was also my safe harbor. When Jim was around, if she was around, things were quite a bit better. And she was loving and nurturing, and I was very much a mama's boy, and I loved her very much. My father was a very bright spot in my life. He stayed in town. We got to see him at least twice a week. I loved him so much, and I still do. And I always felt safe and loved when I was with my father, and I never wanted to go home. And the reason I didn't want to go home was because Jim was at home. He, at some point, his health club business failed. And from that point on, he was kind of home a lot, and mom still worked outside the home. And so, Jim was home alone, home without mom, quite a bit. And I would always get a knot in my stomach when I was coming home and Jim was home. And that was pretty much every day after school. I'd get this knot in my stomach because I had to go be in the house with that man. And oftentimes mom wasn't there to run interference. And and so the upshot of this is that I didn't feel safe in my home. I didn't feel safe in the one place that you're supposed to feel safe. And the ramifications of that obviously are deep, right? And they rippled out into every area of my life. And a lot of that stuff is stuff that I'm still recovering from. But the point that I want to make to you is that if you are someone who didn't get abused in a way that's worthy of making a movie about, if you didn't get thrown down the stairs or beat with a pipe wrench or sexually abused, but you still didn't feel safe in your own home, sometimes in your own body, then that is something that deserves to be healed. It deserves to be acknowledged, and it deserves to be worked through in whatever way. You might, talk therapy is a little old-fashioned, but that might work for you. There's ways to release trauma from the body now that are very effective and that don't lean on talk therapy. Like, you don't have to get in and understand every little detail of your childhood in order to release some of those bodily traumas that are plaguing you, that show up in messed up emotional reactions, procrastination, trouble focusing, all of the things, poor self-esteem, you name it. There's ways to do it, and it's important that we do it, that we admit it. And I come from the classic old school male, don't talk about your feelings, just be healthy or whatever, just be awesome, just be healed, or just don't acknowledge that you need to heal. And, that doesn't get us very far. So ultimately we have to heal. And so my message to you is that if you are suffering from these lesser traumas, they're real and they're important. And you have to be able to get through them so that you can feel safe in your own body, You can feel safe in your own home. And ultimately, that we can learn to love ourselves in the way that our parents could not love us. And so I do want to end this on a softer note, because there was a lot of good things that came from my childhood, even from the difficulty of living with Jim. And one of them is that I do know that he tried. And I know that he tried because, well, first of all, he would tell us what he was doing as a parent. He was very into his own philosophy and would tell us why he was doing what he was doing, which, was kind of the ultimate gaslighting before there was a word for it, because, he made it seem like it was our fault that all of this was going on. But he really did kind of think himself into a corner and have to be to where he had to be a disciplinarian, and, exact whatever punishments on us that he said he was going to exact. And I know that he thought that he was right in this because a couple of reasons. One is because he actually got better with my sister. Now, he got better between his first 5 kids and me and my brother a little bit. In that he didn't fly off the handle. He anytime he corporally punished us, it was measured, and it was intentional, and there were warnings, and chances for us to correct our behavior, I guess. But then with my sister, who is 8 years my senior, I was the baby until she came along, or 8 years my junior, I was the baby till she came along, and he was a lot better with her. He was so much better with her. And that's one of the things that I'm really grateful for, is I never wanted her to have to go through what we went through. And also, I didn't need any more misery in my company. Me and my brother were miserable together. And I didn't wish that on my sister. I love her very much. And I am very happy that she had, by comparison, a pretty happy childhood. I mean, everyone has their things. We all have our things from childhood. But I was very grateful that he was good to her. And so the other reason that I know that he tried was because he told me he tried later in life, much later in life, deep in his 80s. We talked about it quite a bit. And at some point he admitted that he was not a good parent, and he apologized for that. And I know that he tried to do the best he could. And, it took him 50 more years or whatever, but he finally figured out that really wasn't the way to go. And I want to also admit or acknowledge the things that I'm grateful for specifically that Jim did in my childhood. And one of them is, he was an asshole. And he used intimidation tactics every day. This is why we didn't feel safe. He would bust into our room or come downstairs or confront us in the kitchen or whatever it was, constantly about, our behavior being not what he wanted it to be. But it wasn't nagging. It was intimidation. I mean, he was a 6 foot tall, bodybuilding, ex-military disciplinarian of German descent, and he was brow furrowed all the time, and just really, it was an intimidation tactics constantly, and we had to believe him because he did corporally punish us. He would follow through on his word, and so, we were intimidated and afraid every day. But one of the reasons that he did that was to toughen me up, because I was a really, really soft kid, and there's nothing wrong with being a really soft, emotional kid. However, the world is a little bit tough, and I have always been grateful for that one thing, or that one, I guess, side effect of all of that, is that it toughened me up, and that was of great utility to me in my teen years and in my adulthood, and I very much appreciate that. And the other thing that he did for me is, through all of this, kind of juxtaposed against it in a way, is that he espoused the power of positive thinking in the 70s when it was kind of starting to gain some traction. He was really into it. And it was inculcated into my head by the time I was 12, 13 years old. And that was actually a beautiful thing. It was kind of dogmatically pounded into my head, which is great because, I mean, if you're going to do some hardwiring into your kid's brain, that's a pretty good message to hardwire in there, that they have the ability to affect their life by the way they use their brain. So I appreciated that. And it has been such a deep and positive impact for me in my life. And, frankly, is foundational to what I do today, what I'm doing right now with the channel. And so I'm deeply, deeply grateful for that. And then the other things that I'm grateful for with respect to Jim is that he really loved my mom and my sister and treated them well. And he kind of lost it at the end and drove my mom a little insane as he was being tormented by his long, slow decline at the end. He kind of brought her down with him in a way. But you can say nothing about Jim Roberts if you can't say that he was devoted to my mom. For almost 49 years, he stood by her side, and he was very much in love with her, and he was very devoted to her, and I appreciate that about him. And my sister, he was very good to her. He loved her very much. He was very attentive to her, and she was his baby. She was the apple of his eye, and she was the only one he asked for in his final hours. And he waited for her to come back to town that one last time so that he could see her. And that's when he let go that night. And so, all lives have good and bad points, and everything that we do ripples out into our community, into the fabric of our society in all of the ways that it's supposed to. And there were things that were given, and I'm grateful for them. And there were things that were hard, and I'm grateful for them, because those things that are the hardest are often the things that build the aspects of our character that we ourselves find the most value in. And so I appreciate that very much. And so with that, I would like to say thank you, Jim, for the lessons. Some of them were hard, and I did appreciate them. And there was other ways to do it, but in many ways you helped to shape me into what I am today, even though it was sometimes through a very unpleasant crucible. And also, I would like to say thank you for treating my mom and my sister so very well. And as I told you on your 90th birthday, Jim, you are loved and you are forgiven. Rest in peace.